everybody and welcome along to a brand new video where today I'm continuing my look back through the Russell T Davies era of Doctor Who as we reach arguably the peak series of Doctor Who, I think, in terms of mainstream fan and viewership. It's series 4. So yes, this was the 2008 series of Doctor Who, the last full series to be written by Russell T Davies, following on by doing the several specials in 2009 before handing the role over to Stephen Moffat for 2010. So this was in many ways Russell's kind of big last hurrah. Obviously we had a few of the specials doing a little bit of that, but certainly you feel the end of this series is very much Russell throwing everything he can at this and really sort of making the big exciting finale to his era almost by bringing basically every single significant character back. But I don't think that kind of marks the whole series. Obviously the Rose plotline is a massive thing throughout series 4, or is hinted at early on and during the series, and then obviously becomes a major thing at the end of the series. But apart from that, it still feels fairly new and fresh, I'd say, it's not constantly sort of self-referencing itself to previous series and things like that, which I think is always quite a good thing. Of course, series 4 brought back Donna Noble, Catherine Tate having starred in the Christmas special The Runaway Bride at the end of 2006. She was then sort of, I think Russell T Davies basically just inquired whether she'd be interested, and she was massively up for it, and suddenly she was doing a whole series of Doctor Who as the main companion, reprising the role of Donna Noble, but with a little bit more character this time round, having been written as what ends up being a fairly sort of generic comedy character, but with a little bit of extra in there, but still a fair amount of just a comedy character, or certainly a one-off character in The Runaway Bride. So it's nice to see her being a lot more fleshed out, and I think was able to just quash the doubts that people had about casting Catherine Tate as the companion. Like, as a one-off episode, you wouldn't have a problem with it, but the actual companion, Catherine Tate, people were a little bit concerned, a little bit sort of unsure as to how it would actually work. But ultimately, she's arguably one of the best companions of all time in Doctor Who, I think. So yes, this series, well, it didn't begin, but before this series, there was the fairly inconsequential 2007 Christmas special, Voyage of the Damned, featuring Kylie Minogue. That was the big thing, and I think it's still possibly the highest rated Doctor Who episode of New Who. Not quite of all time New Who, because of good old City of Death during ITV strikes days when the only channel on was BBC One, and so 17 odd million people watched it. That's never going to be topped, but in terms of New Who, I'm pretty sure Voyage of the Damned has the most viewership ever, because it's a Christmas special, it's peak of popularity with David Tennant as the Doctor, and it had Kylie Minogue in it, so it was just a recipe to be able to do that. And it's a classic disaster movie style episode, quite a long story, nearly 75 minutes, one of the longest New Who stories. It's solid, it's unspectacular, it's a Christmas special, it's fairly inconsequential, as I say. There's really not major stuff you can say about it. It's just your standard sort of festive adventure, but not with any real long-lasting plot thread at all. It's all a self-contained story. So it means we can just tackle straight into Series 4. And so yes, of course, Series 4 begins with Partners in Crime, a lovely sort of heartwarming, quite comedic and fun and entertaining story that reintroduces Donna Noble into the programme, and seeing the Doctor and Donna constantly having near misses with each other, and eventually obviously meeting in a very funny moment as well. I think that's kind of a lot of this series, particularly this opening episode, is this fun is almost the buzzword that you can put with it, I think. As much as I don't think it's necessarily one of the greatest episodes ever, and probably not even one of my favourites, but I can very much acknowledge, having watched it recently with Megan for the Megan Reacts, that it is a very fun story, a very easy, light-hearted, entertaining, enjoyable way to get into the series. It's, again, the way that Russell does the start of a series, as I've mentioned in the last few videos, about doing present day, past and future in the first 3 episodes. We see that again in this story, or at least at Alien Planets as well in episode 3. In this series we see that, and this first episode as well is the more inconsequential sort of opener than what Stephen Moffat does later on, with much more serious, exciting, almost epic finale style openers in some of his series. But I think both have their merits, and I think in Series 4 it probably works the most effectively in terms of introducing Donna as a companion, teeing up Rose's return as well by having her right at the end of the episode. That was a massive shock. I can't quite remember if that was known beforehand. I have a sneaky feeling it wasn't, but if you do know, guys, let me know in the comments below whether we knew Rose was returning in episode 1. I feel like we knew she was returning at the end of the series, but not that she'd actually turn up at the end of episode 1. So I think that was quite a big shock, and obviously just a great kind of shocking what on earth is going on moment to be able to kind of reintroduce her into the programme and set up the sort of later part of the series as well. Straight away we're seeing a really strong bond between the Doctor and Donna. Obviously it's nice they've already sort of built up a little bit of a relationship in the Christmas special in 2006, that when we get to Partners in Crime, Donna is actively sort of looking for the Doctor and wants to find him, meet each other again and kind of go travel, because she knows she actually wants to travel with the Doctor. She really does. She's all prepared for it and everything, and I think that's brilliant. And yeah, it just means we can kind of get past the initial sort of who is the Doctor, what's a TARDIS, all this sort of stuff. We've kind of cleared those kind of barriers earlier on, which I think is quite nice. And it means that you don't have to really do all of that until the very end of the episode, and then can just play straight into episode 2. Into what's a brilliant adventure, I think, Fires of Pompeii, episode 2 of the series. Obviously taking us back to Pompeii in the, I think, 1500s. Apologies if I'm wrong, I'm not good on dates and that sort of thing. But I think that is a very, very strong story of this series. Obviously, it's got Peter Capaldi in, so naturally I quite like it as an episode. Karen Gillan, of course, in there as well, featuring companion, so it's very much a sort of clash of past, present and future in that sense of people in Doctor Who. With Fires of Pompeii, but it's just such a sort of an episode that turns very serious and has some very difficult decisions for the Doctor to make. With obviously lots of drawing back to his thoughts in the Time War and how he's not allowed to interfere. He's not allowed to go and save people from a fixed historical event. He just can't do that. He's got to let them all die. And just being able to sort of see Donna being the sort of moral kind of conscience for the Doctor, I think is such a is sort of great early development of her character, giving her more character, I think, and helping, and her showing again why the Doctor needs a companion. He needs someone to sort of stop him from being quite heartless at sometimes, and being willing to do something compassionate, even if it is slightly breaking the rules. I guess you would say that he was allowed to do. He could get away with just saving that one family, and the world didn't all end and everything like that. So I think, yeah, it just again shows the importance of a companion in Doctor Who, or at least in the newer series of Doctor Who, and also what Donna was able to bring to the role, or Catherine Tate was able to bring to the role in being Donna and being that moral conscience, I say, for the Doctor to be able to save that one family. Of course, Peter Capaldi's family as well, which is pretty good. And really, from quite early on, Donna has to go through some pretty tough stuff in these first few episodes, because in episode 3, straight away, on from that, we go to Planet of the Ood, where it's all about the Oods in slavery and in captivity, and she has to experience that. You can sort of see her, how visually sort of affected and hurt by that she is, and how sort of tough it is to deal with, I think. And that's just really, I think, yeah, showing straight away how sort of, as much as there's many glamorous things in the universe and exciting and amazing things, there's also many, many horrible things that can also be an experience. And it's interesting that Donna was kind of put through a lot of bad stuff straight off. Before I don't just say getting a lighter story, but getting a less sort of traumatizing story, I guess, in the Sontaran two-parter following Planet of the Ood. But yeah, Planet of the Ood itself is, I think, a strong story, not necessarily one of my absolute favourites. But I think it is a good sort of reuse of the Ood. It's always a good race to bring back. I think I'm surprised they haven't brought them back more in future series of Doctor Who, but then they were very much felt more of an RTD era sort of monster, I think it's fair to say, even if it wasn't actually RTD who wrote the Ood in the first story, the Satan Pit, the Impossible Planet in the Satan Pit in series 2. But I think they do work quite effectively. Obviously, they're always kind of good for being taken over, being possessed, and all these sort of dodgy things. But then the kind of turnaround moment at the end of the episode, when actually the Oods have been taking control and have run the shop and converted the guy who's sort of been enslaving them, has been able to gradually convert him into an Ood for that final moment, which is just fantastic. And it's just nice to see a happy ending, that all the Ood have been, well, most of the Ood have been saved, and it's all ending on a good note. Even with the ominous "Your song is ending soon" from the Ood as well as the Doctor, which is just the first hint at where we might be getting towards the end of David Tennant's Doctor. So then, as I alluded to, the Sontaran two-parter comes next, of course, reintroducing Martha Jones back into the programme. It was always very much left open at the end of Series 3 for her to be able to come back, and I think it's fairly good that she does come back. She's part of UNIT now, well embedded into that organisation, and so it gives her more reason to be in the story as well, rather than just randomly plucking her into an episode. And I think I don't think it's the strongest of stories. To a degree, I feel Series 4 follows a similar pattern to Series 3 in terms of the first half not being so strong, but then the second half being consistently excellent. From probably Silence in the Library onwards, it's just consistently fantastic episodes. Though probably this first half of episodes are sort of overall a bit stronger than the first half of Series 3, therefore people generally tend to put Series 4 on quite a high position. And I think that's absolutely fine, I agree with that as well. But anyway, coming back to the Sontaran two-parter, that's a story that is nice to see UNIT reintroduced properly into the programme for the first time. We see a bit of them in the Christmas Invasion, but it feels like they're properly involved in a major force for the first time in this story. I think one of the things that is a shame is that they weren't able to get Nicholas Courtney to come back as the Brigadier in this episode, even if he was just in a sort of side advisory role. Or even just as a little cameo, a little scene. It would have been so nice to actually have been able to see him in Doctor Who while he was still with us. Unfortunately, that's not possible now, as he passed away in 2011. But at this time, it was still it was 2007 probably that we've been filming this, or early 2008. And so he obviously appeared in the Sarah Jane Adventures as well, briefly in, I think, Series 2, possibly, around the similar sort of timing fit in the Sarah Jane Adventures. So in some way, I guess maybe they just couldn't quite organise the dates and timings and everything. It just didn't quite work. But so it is a bit of a missed opportunity in that regard. At least they do reference him by saying he's off in Geneva, as he always is, often having a meeting or a conference with Geneva about something or other. It's always a sort of running joke from the classic series a little bit when the Brigadier isn't around with unit. But we have a more generic sort of army general, I guess, who's running the shop in unit and just wants to go and blow up all the Sontarans naturally and to kill them and everything, and that's fair enough. That is kind of the unit stereotype, I guess, a little bit, but with a little bit extra because they are fighting aliens, not humans, so there's a little bit more than a standard military organisation. The Atmos system is a reasonably interesting idea, or not Atmos system, just Atmos, sorry. It's a reasonably interesting idea in focusing on the whole sort of exhaust gases and everything that are going to kill people, and just a way for the Sontarans to basically come and destroy the Earth, taking over everything like that. Standard Sontaran practice. It's nice to see the Sontarans again in this story. It's good that they sort of were able to be brought back, because I'd say they were quite a significant villain in the classic series, and so it's good to be able to sort of bring them back and upgrade them for the 21st century. It is a real shame we haven't seen them since then, or at least we have seen them, but not as a proper enemy of the piece. Obviously we've had Strax, but he hasn't really been an enemy. He's just been a comedy character in the most part. So I'd love to see, maybe in Series 12 or at some point in the future, a proper big, exciting Sontarans are the villain story. I know in some ways it's difficult because how many stories can you actually tell with the Sontarans other than them wanting to just kill people and take over planets and stuff. They're a clone race, so in many ways they're not that interesting. So there are some challenges there, but then they were brought back several times in the classic series, sometimes better, sometimes worse. So I think it would just be nice to see something again in the future that's more of a big Sontaran army, maybe explore the Sontaran Rutan War a bit more, that we haven't really seen. We saw sort of a brief hint at in Horror of Fang Rock, but really not at all. Maybe that's a way to go down it, but I think in this story they work quite effectively, but they do kind of fall back into their stereotype a little bit of just a clone race that kill people and then get rather sillily defeated and tricked, and then their spaceship's blown up, and that's it, they're all gone. Apart from one who I believe is then set up into the Sarah Jane Adventures as well, from what I remember. So there's a few nice links to the Sarah Jane Adventures in this story, and throughout sort of the early series of Doctor Who as well. There's a few things that sort of tangent off to the spin-offs, which is always nice, I think. But yeah, so overall, the Sontaran two-parter, it's good, but not great. Then following that, of course, we have The Doctor's Daughter, where Martha accidentally gets dragged along onto this adventure, not really by her choice, and you can see by the end of the episode she really doesn't want to be there anymore, that she's very happy to be back home on Earth, I can't remember if she's engaged to Tom at this point, even though that then disappears in the future for some reason, but that's a little bit hard to explain. But she gets dragged through the wars in this story. This story focusing on the Doctor's daughter, who's not really his daughter, in Jenny, a character who I think is quite a good, fun character, quite an interesting concept for the Doctor to have to deal with, suddenly being thrust upon a biological, essentially, child that's been given to him, and having to deal with that throughout this episode is quite an interesting dynamic between the two of them. Having his daughter being someone who's very bent on, sort of hell-bent on killing people and war, and that's because she's been has been forced into her as she's been created. And so there's that just interesting conflict throughout this story, which I think is really effectively done. And then seeing her being shot at the end of the episode as well, and the Doctor's pure rage at the man who killed Jenny, but also showing that he wouldn't actually kill him, that he is a good man, ultimately, sort of, some of the time, I guess you would say, and he wouldn't do it. And so but it also just shows the real emotion of the Doctor and how, even though he's only known this character for such a short period of time, how much it can affect him, and I think it's just very effectively done. Leaving Jenny then to be able to fly off at the end of the episode as she comes back to life, a little bit hard to explain. She didn't regenerate. Is she a Time Lord? She's kind of half a Time Lord, maybe, probably, not quite sure. But we haven't seen her since the end of that episode, sadly. Whether we ever will again, I don't know. I think she's done a few Big Finish stories, but I haven't listened to any of them, so I don't really know too much about that. It's a possibility, but I'd say it's pretty unlikely we'll ever see her again in Doctor Who. Then next up comes the classical sort of murder mystery style, Agatha Christie style story, featuring Agatha Christie, Unicorn and the Wasp, which I watching recently with Megan, I enjoyed a lot more than I kind of remembered I did previously. It's really fun. It's really intriguing and interesting. It's very much playing to all the stereotypes of a sort of murder mystery novel style story, but I think does it really, really effectively. And is quite a surprise. I think a bit of a shock at the end of the story as well, seeing that it's the Reverend who is actually the Wasp. And there's just a few various different sort of surprise reveals throughout this story, which I think always keep it interesting and keep you engaged, keep you trying to work out exactly what's going on. And it's also very nicely tied up as well. So I thought that it's, as much as it is your more standard mid-series story, I think it's a very effectively well done mid-series story, with the interesting aspect of having Agatha Christie in Doctor Who doing a murder mystery and an Agatha Christie novel style story as well. Is just very effectively done, I think, even if it is written by Gareth Roberts. Now, once we get through that story, we really start getting into the big hitters of Series 4, with Silence in the Library and Forest of the Dead, the library two-parter featuring River Song's first appearance in Doctor Who. An appearance which you watch in retrospect, and I think it enhances it massively compared to watching it for the first time. As watching it with Megan, she said it wasn't one of the greatest stories she'd ever felt she'd watched, but that's just because at the time, if you're seeing it in the order that the show aired, and obviously us watching it for the first time back in 2008, you didn't know any of the context of it. As much as it was sad and emotional to see this woman called River Song die, she doesn't really mean anything to us at that time. At that point in time, we don't know all the backstory about her and the Doctor that's going to come in the future, and her involvement in the Doctor's life and everything. So I think this story is massively enhanced by a retrospective look at it after you've watched all the future River Song stories, and that's sort of the point I'm at, and I therefore really, really enjoy it for that reason. I also think it is just a thoroughly clever idea across the board in terms of having this sort of mysterious library and then having people save from it and everything. It's just really effectively done sort of throughout. Such a creepy idea with the Vashta Nerada, a classic Stephen Moffat style idea that the shadows are going to kill you, essentially, or simplified, but that's the sort of story behind it. And yeah, there's just so many sort of clever ideas. It just feels a very Stephen Moffat-y sort of idea, and it feels Stephen Moffat's story as it is. And I think it's one of his sort of one of the highlights of his writing career. It's one of his very, very best stories, I think, that, as I say, is even better in retrospect. The next story to follow that is the Companion Light, not featuring Donna, Midnight, which was what looks like a very sort of budget story, but a story that I guess in the past haven't been massively sold on, but having watched it again recently, I do think it is a effective and a very good story. I don't think it's necessarily one of my absolute favourites. Some people do rate it very, very highly. I do agree it's a very clever idea. It's a very creepy idea. It's a very effective way of doing a lower budget story. I think there's lots of interesting aspects. It feels almost like a lot of it's running in real time, apart from the few time jumps early on in the episode where we're going sort of through the journey. As soon as it gets stopped, the ship that they're on, it feels, I think it's pretty much real time all the way through, as we see this mysterious creature that's sort of infected Skye and starts repeating and everything, and just the whole clever idea behind that, and then seeing the sort of nature and the psychology of a human in terms of their pure survival instincts. No matter what their eyes are telling them, they just want to get rid of it, and they think that will solve everything, even though it really won't. And just seeing the depths that the human race will go to fight for survival in this story, and just willing to kill the guy who's trying to save their life just because they think that's going to solve everything, is really, really interesting. So I think it's a great exploration of human psychology, and also the Doctor having to deal with that and finding the best way to deal, and really not doing a very good job of dealing with it. So this is just very much one of those sort of tense, effective Doctor Who stories where you're really not quite sure what's going to happen. You're always on the edge of your seat waiting to find out how it's all going to pan out in the end of things. As much as it's a very self-contained, claustrophobic story as well, you feel very trapped in this very small spaceship that's running out of oxygen, and there's some sort of mysterious threat on this spaceship as well, on the ship as well. And so yeah, I think I think it deserves its reputation reasonably. As much as I maybe don't rate it as highly as some, I do think it is a very effective story. Now, after that, we start approaching the end of the series with episode 11, Turn Left, which is one of my favourite stories. I really, really love this story. It's such a clever idea, a clever way to have a Doctor Light story in terms of, and showing a fictional scenario of what it would be like if the Doctor didn't exist, showing how reliant the human race is on the Doctor in terms of how many alien threats they get, that if the Doctor wasn't there, he wasn't able to be, or originally if he wasn't able to be saved by Donna, if Donna wasn't there, and then therefore the Doctor wasn't there, how everything would go wrong, and how the universe needs the Doctor and Donna, or the Earth needs the Doctor and Donna to keep everything together. It's just such an effective way of exploring, referencing lots of previous episodes and showing sort of footage and showing what would happen if the Doctor wasn't in these various different scenarios, seeing a sort of completely war-torn and destroyed Earth or London being completely wiped out, and then it essentially turning into a load of Donna and co turning into refugees and having to move into houses with 10, 15 other people, and just seeing how she sort of descends into utter depression because of this choice that she doesn't even realise that she's made in this what's ultimately a fictional scenario. But I just think it's so effective in portraying all of that, and then obviously introducing Rose back into the story as well, which is kind of quite well signposted, I think, by this point. And I'm pretty sure it was all just promotional material. Rose is in this episode, it wasn't trying to hide it by this point. This was the episode she's coming back for. Anything previously was meant to be a shock. Now this is it. She's here to the end of the series. It's all going to get very exciting now. Is she going to find the Doctor again? And everything to do with that is sort of the exciting part of having Rose back. And Rose clearly knowing a little bit about what's going to happen in the future, a few hints about the stars going out and everything like that, and about how something's going to happen to Donna, but that it's going to happen to... Which Donna is it she actually referencing? Is she referencing the Donna that we see in this sort of alternative world? Ultimately, it's both, but maybe she didn't know about that. It's a little bit hard to tell. And I think it also just so effectively sets up the finale two-parter as well by properly... We use this episode to re-establish Rose in the series, establishing Donna as well, even more so as a sort of an independent, strong character, and also showing, as I say, about the connection and that the Doctor and Donna have, and that they're both needed to hold the universe together at this point, in terms of if this chain of events hadn't happened, then it all would have gone wrong. And so just teeing up the Dr. Donna for the finale as well, which is where we're heading next. So yes, the finale two-parters, The Stolen Earth and Journey's End, one of the I think arguably the biggest and most epic, the biggest scale story that we've ever seen in Doctor Who. It's arguable, but I feel like it probably is. It just feels... First off, as I mentioned before, we reintroduce basically every character who's had any importance in the last 4 series is in this story. You've got, obviously, the Doctor and Donna, you've got Rose, you've got Martha, you've got Mickey, you've got Jackie, you've got Martha's mum, you've got Captain Jack, you've got the whole Torture team, you've got Sarah Jane, you've got Luke as well, you've got K9 coming in the Journey's End as well. Every single character, even when Harriet Jones turns up in this episode, they get everybody out for this absolute... A bit of a fan service story, you have to admit. It's a bit of fan service, particularly the second part, where there's less story, more fan service, I think is what the second part is about. The first part is amazingly good setup. It's properly writing... I think it's just sometimes the problem of these big finales is writing yourself into a massive corner, because Russell made it so sort of hard to resolve things from, because you've moved the Earth to another place. The Daleks are completely taken over. They're complete massive force. They've destroyed everything. They're in complete control of the whole of the Earth and all these other planets, ready to create the bomb that will destroy the whole universe completely, because the Daleks are mad and mental, and Davros is a bit crazy as well. Of course, Davros is another character brought back. Dalek Khan's in this story as well, just more characters being brought back. And it's just great to see a fully established, massive Dalek fleet that are ready to completely destroy planets. They do feel like an almost unstoppable threat, particularly in episode 1 of this story. And seeing the pure horror that all the companions have when they hear that Dalek exterminate come through the sort of audio link that they've got, and seeing them all just starting to sort of be in utter shock and accepting that's it, we're all dead, we've all lost, there's no chance now. Hundreds of Dalek sources, that's it. That's going to destroy and wipe out the whole Earth no matter what they do. So I thought it's such a great way to set it up by having such sort of unbeatable odds that you're put against. And then, of course, the dramatic moment at the end, the cliffhanger ending with the Doctor seemingly regenerating after having just met Rose again. And then leaving it on that cliffhanger for a week of the Doctor regenerating is crazy. And I would say, personally, for me, is probably the best cliffhanger in Doctor Who history. I don't really think anything has topped that. Yes, it can be easily spoiled if you know he's not regenerating in the next episode, as I think people... It wasn't quite... Well, we knew that David Tennant was regenerating at some point. We didn't quite know all the specifics exactly what was happening, but I have a feeling there were filming shots from the 2008 Christmas special that had already come out, so it kind of blew the cover that he might be regenerating. But it was this, the finale, Journey's End, was the one episode, I believe the only episode of New Who, that they never gave a press copy, because always before the episodes air, they give a copy out to all the journalists to be able to give their little sort of previews of the episode, to be able to write the reviews in the papers and everything like that, just to be able to give sort of people who are interested a preview of it and generally promote the programme before it airs. But because of the significance of this story and the cliffhanger it's left on, this is the one story ever in New Who that wasn't given to the press. They wanted to try their best to keep it as quiet as possible, which really shows they were making an effort to try and make this cliffhanger really believable. And it feels believable watching it if you don't know. I think it's really, really effective, and it does just set up... You can't really have a bigger cliffhanger than the Doctor turning into a new Doctor. That is about as big as it gets. Obviously, it wasn't the case. So yes, unfortunately, Journey's End isn't really a patch for The Stolen Earth. It's a bit of a cop-out with the Doctor sort of pushing all the energy into his hand. I do think ultimately there are some very clever ideas in there with the whole Dr. Donna concept. I do think that's so well teed up throughout the series. I think Series 4 is arguably the best and the worst. It doesn't really feel like it has a story arc through this series, but then you get to the finale, and every little tiny thing that was a cutaway the line or throwaway line throughout the series is suddenly important and relevant to the finale, and created the whole sort of... It is involved in the Dr. Donna coming together, a few references to that idea as well, and it just all ties up so brilliantly, so effectively. Russell did such a good job in Series 4 of bringing in the little clues and putting them all into one, rather than just Saxon or Torchwood or Bad Wolf, as he'd done in the previous 3 series. It is great to see Davros again in this story, and I think he's a good threat to have back in the episode, even if it feels like he doesn't necessarily do a huge amount. Maybe not compared to his appearance in The Magician's Apprentice and The Witch of Familiar later in a later series, where he feels like, although he's again just sitting in his chair not doing so much, but that's naturally the role of Davros to a degree. He's just running the shop, he's a leader, he's not really able to do anything because that's not his role. But as it's shown, he is the sort of pet of the Daleks. He's left down in the sort of basement, just with his little playthings down there, and not really able to do much. He's being kind of left and stuck down there. And so yeah, it's nice to see him. It's more, again, maybe a little bit of fan service more than anything else, but it is good to see his sort of pure power mad craziness when he's like, detonate the reality bomb in a pure sort of evil madness, evil mad genius style way. The evil laughter is sort of classic in that sense. So that's quite effective, and as I say, it's really good to see a proper Dalek fleet. But they probably are a little bit too easily and too comically defeated in terms of the Doctor of Donna becoming the Dr. Donna, flicking a few switches, and then all the Daleks spin around and their ships blow up. It's like, it does feel like, ultimately, when you get into such a difficult sort of writing corner by making the odds so difficult to overcome, it's very difficult to find an effective, satisfying solution to all those problems. But it does feel a little bit of a cop-out that Donna flicking a few switches, because she's magically got some Doctor knowledge in her head, is therefore able to save the day and defeat a whole massive Dalek fleet and send back 27 planets. It's like, that doesn't really seem very believable. And is probably the biggest letdown of this 2-part finale, I would say. But then after that, there's some beautiful emotional moments. Obviously, the Doctor and Rose in Bad Wolf Bay once again, to have their sort of 2 series on. Rose finally gets her Doctor, even though it's a slightly different Doctor, but it's also the Doctor like when she first met him, back when it was Christopher Eccleston in Series 1. And I think that's a really, really nice, and a nice going full circle moment for Rose, that she's sort of got the Doctor, but she's got the Doctor from the very, very beginning, and she's able to live out her life with him. It is a bit of fan service again. It does dent the Series 2 finale in its effectiveness, because obviously Rose ultimately does get what she wants and doesn't have a reason to be sad in the end, but she does go through that grief phase, so there is sort of I don't think it completely ruins it, but it does maybe take a little bit of the shine off it in retrospect. And then obviously Donna's departure as well, which is arguably one of the saddest departures for a companion in Doctor Who, because by this point we've all warmed to her so much. She's such a wonderful, lovely, exciting, fun companion, that we all sort of, I think, feel like almost relate to a bit more than any other one, I think. And the Doctor has done so much for her that almost it's worse than dying, that she's going to lose all of her memory of the Doctor and have to live on but as the old Donna. Because the old Donna isn't really a very likeable Donna, and a Donna we want her to be, and that we know she can be. And that's all taken away at the end of this episode, and so it's such a heartbreaking moment. You can see the Doctor's sort of pure sadness, and you really see at the end of this episode how he really is kind of getting to that run down, tired of losing people stage, that's then explored a bit more in some of the future David Tennant, sort of final David Tennant episodes, that he just always loses all of his friends. They always go in the end, and I think that you can really see how hard it is for him at this point, having lost what was been his best friend for a very, very long time now in Donna. But such an effectively done final scenes in this episode. And so that completes the series. A wonderful... I don't think it's my favourite series. I put it in my top 3, where it would be the best that we've... would it be the best? It's a very tough one, because I do love Series 1 and Christopher Eccleston. I also love Series 5 and some of the later Capaldi series as well. But so Series 4 is definitely up there. It's definitely better than Series 2 and Series 3. There's no doubting about that. And I'd say is probably about on a par with Series 1. So a very, very strong series. For me, it feels like a series that just doesn't have a bad episode. Whereas every other series you feel like has its particularly bad episodes. Series 4, the kind of worst of it is maybe Planet of the Ood, maybe the Sontaran two-parter. That's about as bad as it gets, and that's not bad. That's pretty good. And then you have amazing episodes like Silence of the Library, Forest of the Dead, Turn Left, Stolen Earth. There's amazing episodes in there. So I really think it is one of the most consistent runs of Doctor Who and one of the best series of Doctor Who's ever. And so yes, that is it. That is my review of Series 4 of Doctor Who, looking back on it 11 years later. How could it be 11 years since that series? It's just crazy. And also crazy to think that that was probably the height of popularity of Doctor Who at the time. I think the general audience was so sort of engrossed in the David Tennant Doctor, and then bringing Catherine Tate, another very mainstream sort of figure in TV, to be able to put those two together in Doctor Who just made it a very easy watch for the general public. Having great storylines in the way they did, or ones that very much appeal to a general audience in a more sort of drama way than in a sci-fi way, I think is what helped engage that mainstream audience. And then just getting people talking around the end of the series, that cliffhanger, everybody was talking about it. That's what Doctor Who doesn't have anymore, that it hasn't had for the last few years, sadly. And I struggle to see it ever hitting again. I don't think Doctor Who will, at least in its current phase, will ever hit the popularity that it did during Series 4 and the specials in 2009. I think that is the pure mainstream peak of Doctor Who possibly ever, and possibly even for the foreseeable future. But what do you guys think of Series 4? Do you think it's the best series of Doctor Who? Not such a fan of it? What are your favourite episodes, your least favourite episodes? Let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you guys have got to say. But this video is getting on a bit now, so let's get on with it and let's get out of this video. Remember to hit our like button if you enjoyed it. Do you want to hit subscribe if you are new here, and I'll see you again very soon for another one, I'm sure. Goodbye.